myself when we have the opportunity to be able to work with NASA and the Kennedy Space Center. So, I mean, that is a pinnacle in anyone's career. So it's really where we changed the conversation. It started out with a commoditized transactional conversation about LED, right? And we got into pixel pitch and mills and all this stuff. But the reality is that we called it kind of an audible and a timeout and said, wait a minute, what do we really want to achieve? And it was what we want to transform the park and really underscore the authenticity of space travel. So from there we said, well, you know what, we'll get to the technology, but let's talk about the message, right? And as marketers, right, we have a huge responsibility to deliver to our guests, our audience, what that experience is. So I'll tell you, and I'll share with you, we call it the broccoli strategy. Okay. The broccoli strategy. So if you'll humor me for a second, when you travel to Orlando, like everybody does, you really go there to experience fantasy, right? Disneyland, or Disney World, you've got Epcot, Universal, all of that. Well, these are borrowed experiences, right? They're an injection of fantasy that have a real intensity while you're there, and when you leave, it kind of fades. Now, if you travel 45 minutes kind of northeast towards Space Coast, what you get is the experience of the fantastic. It's the authenticity that has been captured. You know, I mean, when we even think about, you know, the technology of a mobile phone, it was all birthed from space exploration. So our responsibility is to capture and create a mind shift from fantasy to the fantastic. And that's what we did. I'll go back to my broccoli strategy, right? Because the chief operating officer for Kennedy Space Center, Theron Protz, challenged us. And he said, you know, we are the broccoli of Orlando. People come, they go to Disney, they go to Legoland, they go all around, but, you know, kids don't like broccoli. So I said, Jerry, will you please help me put some cheese on our broccoli? And so that's what we did. So that's how it was birthed. The process really began storytelling, right? And we started to go back to really the tradition of, you know, just conveying that experience. And when you have an international audience, digital signage is fantastic because it's not dependent upon sound. And the pictures have got to telegraph that experience. And again, that taking you from that fantasy, which you undoubtedly have experienced, into fantastic and capturing the realities. So we did a lot of filming. You know, that we were privileged to be able to get behind the scenes, behind the gates, and really kind of show what it would be like to be an astronaut, connect, you know, with what's happening today with space travel. You know, and folks of my generation grew up with the Apollo mission, right? Today, when you think of NASA, you kind of go back and go, okay, space shuttle, but nobody's sending people to the moon and nobody's sending people to outer space. People don't realize that we have an International Space Station, you know, that is there right now and has been. And we have, you know, Elon Musk and space, you know, SpaceX, which is launching, you know, almost every month, every other month. I think to be able to make the content and the displays as interactive as possible, that was really, you know, critical to be able to capture the, you know, the essence of what these exhibits are, but to entertain them through education and inspire them and bring them into that communication. Again, without audio, it is a very, very big challenge. So you do it by scale, right? And LED is a great, you know, technology to be able to telegraph that and to be able to have constant, you know, frequency and rotation of message, so that people don't realize that, you know, or they don't, you know, allow themselves to get stale, right? If you're out there and you're walking around, like in any of us, you know, in any kind of a general environment, after, you know, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, if you start seeing that kind of a loop, right, then you kind of get a little bored and you move on. So our whole challenge was to keep it fresh. And you know, design, if you saw the designs, is to make it very, very innovative. You know, and LED modules, you know, the cabinets that we use are roughly about 19 inches square. I call them, my layman's terms, they're like Legos, right? No disrespect to Legoland, but they, you know, they connect. And rather than just go with rectangular or typical out-of-home, 1448 type size, what we did was we fabricated and worked with Yesco, which is a great fabricator, to be able to come up with unique, you know, displays that kind of play off of each other, but really, you know, take the eye in a more organic dimension as opposed to a real rigid, you know, geometric shape. Try doing an installation during guest hours, right? Where you're QAing in real time. So, you know, it becomes an exhibit in itself, right? That's number one. Number two, you're dealing with Florida. So you've got hurricanes, you've got to be able to have security, you know, in terms of going, you know, these are exterior signs, and they have to go down 16, you know, 20 feet into the ground to be able to secure these high winds. So you have rockets, you have this rocket garden, so you have these long, you know, shapes, and they're tethered and secured, and then you have us going straight into the ground, which, you know, you hit water after a certain point. So that's, and the third was the heat. Right, and you know, we're, you know, in the process right now of, you know, going through another round of projects which are touch, and you can imagine, right? You know, you don't want to, you know, burn yourself on the glass. So when you are standing in front of a display outside, and the temperature is 100, 110 degrees, humidity, and then you have the sun beating down on the glass. Right, you want to be able to touch the screen and not have a third-degree burn. That's one of the reasons we're here, right? Is to be able to, you know, learn, and, you know, great advantage of you know, being part of Digital Signage Expo. I think that you know, beyond just, you know, I beam with pride, you know, to be associated with such an iconic brand, and just to play, you know, just you know, a small role is just, you know, been like Jimmy's on my career, right, to be able to share this. But it's ongoing, and to really have a client like Kennedy that values storytelling and puts storytelling first, and then supports it with the right technology. And that, I find, is incredibly refreshing. A tip would be to first, you know, work on a strategy, and ask yourself, what's the responsibility of that communication? And I would say that, you know, in our world, if it's in, you know, we kind of, you know, embrace the whole notion of engagement. And that's what, you know, the biggest challenge of digital signage and communication and content is. So if it's employee engagement and internal communications, then you have to be able to, you know, bring to life, I think, you know, more than just cake in the break room and, you know, hey Corey, congratulations, you know, a spotlight. It's really being able to have eye contact, and I found that being a recovering art director and a creative director, coming out of the advertising world, when I talk and you see me kind of, you know, as a, in a profile, it's less engaging. But if you look at kind of the camera as being the audience, you know, and even just a great smile, and, you know, we've experimented around with happy birthday, where it's just nothing more than just a 10-second, you know, just a smile. It's more engaging, right? The other thing is with static content is just to be bold and direct, minimal. And, you know, we run kind of our rule that headlines at 72 point, right? Sans serif, stay away from serif fonts, right, because of the pixelation. If you have a subhead, keep it around, you know, 36 to 48 point. Bullets if you're going to have copy. But we live in a time where, man, video is, you know, is the way to really create engagement. You know what I'm hearing throughout, and it started very early yesterday, and that is there is a hunger among our community for best practices. So everybody is talking, and as you go to some of the workshops, what I heard is, a real reinforcement on the what doesn't work. So everybody's really happy to share problems and pain points. But what we really need are some really well-crafted best practices that we can deploy. And if you think about this community, we touch every kind of food group out there, in relating and conveying messages. So that is a huge, hunger point that I see. Number one, I think a disconnect between what we're talking about, content and technology. Everybody, you walk this show, it's about, it's a lot of hardware, and people want to talk about hardware. Engineers want to talk hardware. Marketers want to talk message. So to be able to bring it together, and I think these two groups need to make peace, come to the same table, right, and realize that we live together. Because this show would not be terribly exciting if there was nothing on the screens. So that's number one. Number two, I think it is, the owning, right, the digital signage message, similar to what we're talking about. I have found, we're fortunate, we work with over 2,000 clients, and I'm fortunate where I get to be the face of the company many times, and I'll visit with 9 clients in a week, and the same thing comes up. Huge company, 200,000 employees. I've got one person working on digital signage. A system administrator, I might have a designer, an architect. Nobody wants to own it. They'll own either the contact center space and the data portion of it, or they'll own the internal communications, which is their intranet. But I find that this is kind of, content, especially for digital signage, is a stepchild. And a huge opportunity for us. I think similar to what we're talking about, it's knowledge sharing. It's critical, and just like what I love talking about, Kennedy Space Center and NASA, is that nobody wins alone. And you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar sunrise industry in digital signage. It's everywhere. It is not slowing down. And to be able to walk, right, these corridors, be welcomed into competitors' booths, because we have a shared bond. And that is that we work for our customers, our clients. And satisfaction and going beyond is critical. So I love the knowledge sharing. I think we're all thirsty, we're all so hungry for innovation. What's new? Who is kind of crafting out an ownable space, right, in this market? And that's what we're all trying to do, so we don't step and trip over each other and become commodities. And there's so much opportunity here, and that's why this is absolutely a fabric of RMG, is to be not only a member but to be an active participant within the organizations.